Hello. Let's start the chapter 8 on the process of character design. I briefly mentioned it in the last chapter. We'll work on it along with or ahead of the script. That's the character design. Most anime features multiple characters. We do character design first. It's then followed by illustration work. So this is the most important on the screen after the background. Of course, it will be drawn by the key animator at the end, but it'll be based on the character design. We need to set the details, including the eyes and hair. And we need to add highlights and shadows. Everything is determined by the character design. So this is an extremely important task. I think the poor character design results in a poor animation. Especially, in a realistic sense, the appearance is the most important. I think there are the talented for that. I believe some people are talented for character design, while others are not. These days, when you design a character, you create an original sketch. Illustrators are involved in the original sketch. Sometimes the cartoonists participate. You can also present a direction, then develop it into an animation. In this chapter, I'd like to talk about how to create one from scratch. We'll be on a practice later, so let's cover the details then. We'll look at things that are needed and required. We'll also talk about the process and approaches for that. It'll be a bit theoretical. But from here on out, I'll explain things with drawing. I hope you follow along with me. First of all, the character design should be attractive. This is a must. There's another important element, which is also needed for the original sketch. It should be easy to draw. You need to decide on the number of the props and the line colors, etc. Unless they're decided right, it can't be used for animation. Let's think of a game design. There will be a lot of props. They might be structurally complex. You might find it's impossible to animate them by drawing yourselves. Even for CG, you'll need to put a lot of effort. The lines should be as less as possible. You need to work with few lines as possible if you can deliver your intent. First, let's look at the most difficult part, the charm. This is very tricky. It would require expressing the face, eyes, hair, clothing, and body. And it's hard to specify each charm. Even the popular designs look to go out of style. So they would gradually disappear or change. That's the difficult point. But there's a flow. The character design isn't something very solitary. That's the case even for illustrations and cartoons. I often find it's very hard to go against with the trend. It is, especially when drawing eyes. Some parts already seem to have changed since 10 years ago. We used to draw the eyes rounder or draw the eyelashes excessively. In the 90s, we used to draw them very largely. There are various trends for the eyes and hairstyles. It changes sometimes, but, basically, we want to design a lively character. I want to talk about that part. Next, I'm not sure if this can be considered as a charm. It's the movement of things swaying. For example, you can make a long hair sway and flutter. Determining whether or not to create such movement can also be character design. The same goes for a strap or a ribbon on the waist. It might bounce when you jump. There are also quite a few ways to tie ribbons around the waist. These also can shake. Shaking it to match the character's movement. will instantly make it more realistic. Let me talk about things other than illustrations. You can see the objects changing or moving according to the movement. It's good to apply the principle to the props in animations. It is better to add movements rather than not include them. Of course, it will be demanding if you have too many of them. Anyway, you can attach something fluttering or moving somewhere on the body. Doing so often increases the character's charm. I don't think there's much to say here. The character designers naturally create them while thinking about such point. Of course, some things are done according to the director. If the director doesn't want that approach, this kind of thing will rarely happen. There will be another method of designing different movements from illustrations. So it would be good to keep that in mind. Let me talk about what I told you earlier. After all, it's good to use as few lines as possible. Basically, it's the same for all the processes after the video. It's the same in key animations, in-betweens, illustration, and direction, etc. It gets harder to work just by having one more line. Let's think of the wrinkle. This is also determined at the character design. Think about clothes that have a lot of wrinkles on them. The shadows will become more complicated. It'll require a lot of effort. So the lines should be drawn as simply as possible. I think that Japanese animation has evolved that way. But, depending on the work or designer, the lines can be so finely. In that case, there are several ways, such as making less movement. I prefer to draw things simply with clear movements. Once you decide on the design, you won't be able to change it. You might regret it later. So try to keep it as simple as possible. There may also be frills to give things some texture. There will be a lot of wrinkled areas and seams. It's also important to decide how much of this should be omitted. If you omit too much, it may not look very realistic. There are certain details that must be kept in animation. The same goes for shadows. It's very important to put shadows, making them noticeable to many people. Let's think of top light. Let me draw this. When designing characters, you may wonder why they are drawn with their arms opened. This is to reduce the amount of obscured areas. If they are standing at attention, some parts will be hidden. I'm sorry for this poor drawing. Let's talk about shadows. This may not be a very good example. Add the shadows on the proper areas. You can draw everything in detail. But these fine shadows would make it unclear. What if you pass this on to the animator? They might not know which parts are the shadows and which are not. Everyone handles the unclear or ambiguous parts. The way to deal with them varies from person to person. Let's say you want to create this kind of shadow. It might have been better to separate the shadow layer. In a very simple way, you can draw one shadow for each sleeve. This is somewhat symbolic. This ensures a certain appearance no matter who draws it. I think that's important for character design. A character design that is difficult for many people is not a very desirable one. It would be good and beautiful if just one person handle it. But in a group work, it's meaningless if not everyone can do it. So, it can be drawn in this way. Consider the quality later. Let's simply add some shadows here. I think it's really important to make sure that anyone can draw the same way. This might be too simple. But this is an extreme example. The point is that there is a volume here, so a shadow is cast. There are wrinkles, so we're putting a line of shadow. Make sure that anyone who looks at the design immediately understands it. This is not simply reducing shadows. It's about following the dimension. I think it looks better in animation to simply put the shadows on the sides. What if we perfectly keep the dimension? I'm talking about the level of reality. For a realistic work, the character design must follow the three-dimensionality properly. In short, let's ignore the ambiguous areas. I'm not saying that this character itself is good. Imagine you express every shadows and keep the three-dimensionality in detail. I think it would be quite difficult to trace things that way. It's hard to reflect them in design. So it's better to avoid those details. Let's move on. I'll tell you how the character design is actually done in the practical work. It's about format. There are some basic requirements. Let me draw the front view of this character. It is spreading its arms out like this. Here's the profile. And here's the backside. When drawing a storyboard, you have to consider all angles. You want to prepare everything. The backside might not be there for the original characters in the game. What if you want to improve those characters? It is often necessary to create only the backside from scratch. The arm length of the back one don't match the frontal one. It shouldn't be like this. After adding the shadows here, you'll share this as the shadow settings. And you need the collection of facial expressions. You'll be drawing them based on the variations in the main work. You'll have a smiling face. You'll also have an angry faces, and such. That's the collection. Recently, you can see they often put 4 at the top and 4 at the bottom. Let me draw profile. You can tilt the angle a bit. You can draw the same expression by rotating it in a different angle. These also should be prepared. This allows the illustrator to try various angles. It's often helpful. It is, especially when the character looking down or looking up. It can be tricky to handle the jaw when the character is looking up from below. What will the jaw look like when it looks up this way? Should it be dented like this? How will the shadow be cast here? You want to set those things in advance. That'll be helpful during illustration. Even if it's included in illustration, you can create them naturally. So I think this helps the overall process. The next important thing in animation is closed eyes. When you laugh, you would close your eyes like this. And when you sleep, they will be like this. There are several types of closed eyes. It's called an expression difference. Having these settings makes drawing easier. It becomes much easier to draw the blinking eyes or closed eyes. So, they're usually set in advance. Let's review what we covered. We talked about the full body, facial expressions, and shadows. Basically, you put in all the shadows and often a top light as well. Backlighting is also widely used on screens these days. Some works use side lights, backlights, and footlights for variations. There are generally several patterns. They're used to specify each of the looks clearly. That is, if you prepare the patterns, it'll help the illustrator to work easily. Let's move on to the color materials. This is a pretty important part. In the works I'm currently directing, I can see its character designs. Most of them are colored. It's often done that way recently. More and more designers do it that way. Without color, you might not know how to design. Let's say there's something shiny attached to somewhere on your body. It's quite difficult to define what color it glows in and what the range is. We used to write down in where the object shines. These days, many people work digitally. So it would be convenient to put it simply. Even if the color changes in actual work, it's very helpful in many ways. You want to consider the parts of characters and divide them. You also figure out whether each part is skin, clothing, or metal. Then color it lightly, which is easier. You can go all the way with that color design. I think that coloring is a skill of yours and a way to improve the quality of your work. Next, let's look at the detailed processing. This is about the attitude in this industry. Let's take a closer look at the story within the industry. There's a character, for example. Look at this one. Let me draw this. Let's say it is wearing something like a vest. It must be wearing clothes inside, too. And it has complicated props attached like this. I don't know what it is. If you just draw it like this, you can't tell what it looks like inside. The basic settings should have the details about how this is structured. You want to contain the inner look. It's necessary to get rid of the vest and define the look of inside. Here's another one. You need to set things for a character with long hair. What about long-haired character? When viewed from behind, the back is sometimes hidden by hair. So you need a drawing without hair or clothes. You need its supplementary material for each step. I think that's the feature of animation. I believe that you'll surely prepare separate materials for various settings. You make sure that they're delivered to others. These are the characteristics of animation. Let's move on. There's one method that has been used a lot recently. It's gradient. Let's take a look. You'll likely see it on the hair the most. There's a character like this. You put a line this way. Then, you paint the colors differently on each part. It'll be simply separating the colors as data. But this boundary gets blurred in filming. Then, it looks like a gradient. I think it started in the 2010s. This method is used frequently. This is especially true recently. When a single color looks a bit bland, try painting the hair tips differently. Then, you can add a gradient there. Next up is the eyes. There are highlights. There's an outline on the iris. You can draw a line here. Move here to add a gradient up and down. It can be added on both sides of eyelashes, which is appearing in illustrations a lot. If you want to add a bit of red, try putting a line here. This method is often used. You never know if it will work out until you try. Sometimes you might not figure out whether it works or not. But I think it's better to try it than not to do it. You'll use it well if you get skilled. The straight bangs are often divided by colors. Here it goes like this. You can add a gradient to the area close to the skin with the skin-like color. This is kind of invention. The methods used in illustration are applied to animations, I think. I want to see the inventions starting in animation. There are pretty difficult points, though. Anyway, this is a detailed way. I found that the hair and eyes are quite done. Let me tell you things about hair. You would trace only the hair in a different color. It is called color tracing. This happens often with female characters. For this, you set a different colored line at the keyframing step. Then, draw the hair in a different color. The rest is drawn with normal black lines. It's good for a blonde character. It's often used for characters with exotic hair colors. But it's a bit annoying to do. Personally, I sometimes hesitate to do it. But it is a widely used method. There are also different patterns for highlights. This type used to be popular. There are short touches in some works. There were jagged highlights like this in the 90s. Even circular ones were added. You can also add them in multiple layers. There are quite a few different ways to add highlight. The most important thing is to create a design that suits the character or work. I'm a director and also do character design. So I must have a good sense for drawing. Referencing various works is helpful. It's very important to look at them and collect good methods. There are also many different patterns for blush brushes. Mostly, it'll be done subtly. The point is if you adjust its subtlety and add more touches. A round shadow on the nose often appears recently. It's adding the dimensionality on the nose. You can easily see it in the most animations in the 2020s. There is definitely a trend. It's kind of a boom. So far, we've covered the character design with some chatters. It consists of the facial expressions, full body, shadows and props. Let me tell you more about the props. Just drawing the ear piercing can be quite demanding. There can be piercings, needles, and various other things. If they look attractive, it's totally okay. However, they might be weird in actual producing. If something's missing, you will need to do it again. It'll take your time, as I oversee both direction and illustration. I have to put a lot of effort into it. The nails are more detailed. You want to professionally set up how to express the nails. Then, you can add details. You can color trace only the root. Whether to color trace all the way to the tip depends on the work. Anyway, it's good to set it up. It's often difficult if there is no setting on how to do it when you go up to the tip. When coloring later, it'll be hard to add colors without setting. That's why you must set it up when going up to the nail tip. The same goes for the eyes. You need to set the details visible when zoomed in. Without settings, it's hard to draw them. If you leave it to the illustrator, it'll also make it hard to add color. And things will look different in each cut, so it's customary to set details for the maximized cut. Actually, this is obvious to anyone in this industry. I wonder, what do you feel about this? I'm just explaining it, just in case. Let's summarize it. Is it always good to have fewer lines? I personally think that it's not necessarily good. Let's say an animator designs original works. If so, the lines often become fewer. It may depend on your mindset as well as whether it's easy to draw or not. If you use too few lines to avoid cumbersome, it will become uniform. They all end up having similar designs or a plain, boring feel. So you need to be skillful or have a good sense of it. You want to consider the viewer's perspective. There might be quite a lot of lines used. Still, even if you need to draw many lines, prioritize the character's charm. I also don't really like commercial animations that have extremely few lines. It's definitely better to have some details. I like the works that have cleverly omitted or excellently balanced lines. I would say I prefer the trendy design. Let me summarize. After all, the most important thing is to look attractive. There are many ways to handle various elements. But the most important thing is that the design appears pretty or cool. Let's make sure not to miss it in the overall process. So far, I have theoretically explained character design. In the next chapter, we will go into storyboarding. I think this is my main job. I'll be covering what I'm usually good at. I guess I'll be telling you about it comfortably. I'm looking forward to it. See you in the next chapter.